Now, in the case that it is 20 or 21, we want to say console.log. You can go to war. Congrats. Your age is 21. Okay? And then we are going to break. Okay? And I'm going to explain what all this means in a bit. Okay? And then we're going to say, in the case that age is none of these things, we're going to say the default is that we say console.log could not determine your age. Okay? And then we're good to go here. Okay? Now, you see that we said here we got age is 18. Okay? And it might not look like something important until we put it in a function. So let's create a function, const report, and we say it's equals to age. And here, inside here, we basically take the switch statement that we have here, and then we paste it inside here, and we hit enter. So now if we say report for 34, we say could not determine your age. Okay, we say report 21, you can go to war. Congrats, your age is 21. Okay, so here we just showed an example of what a function does. Okay, so with a function you can repackage something, because otherwise we'll have to create age again and then type the whole switch again. And this is something we were talking about earlier. We said you take some code and you want to reuse the code over and over, you put it in a function and you call the function every time you want that code to run. Okay, it's a simple concept that enables repetition. Okay, so in this case we created a function and then we passed in a parameter. So we've talked about the switch, we've talked about the logical operators, we've talked about the for loop, the classical for loop, we talked about while loop, we talked about how you increment in the while loop, and we're going to cover one more topic, and then we're going to go into HTML and start writing some code so that you can see all of these things in practice, and we're going to ask some questions. Now, are there any questions at this point, or should we fire down and continue? No questions? Okay, we can continue. Now, we have you can go to war. Congrats from our reports 21, and then if we say report 18, and you can actually even make it a conditional, so like it depends like the case, but yeah, let's leave that for when we actually start writing intense code. Okay, so now we have we talked about the switch statement. Now we're going to talk about one more thing, and then we're going to move on. So earlier we said const report, and we can create another function. We can call this Tony, since Tony is joining right now. Okay, so we can say const Tony, and then here, remember we talked about an anonymous function. We said it's equals to this here. Basically, you just created a function. Okay, now a function there's a way you define a function. We said you can define a function by giving it function Tony, okay? Or you could say let Tony is equals to, these are two ways to define a function, okay? Now, when you're defining a function, you can pass data into a function. When you're creating a function, let me repeat, you can pass data into a function. Now, remember one of the things we said when we started JavaScript is that your job as a programmer is to take data, transform it, and then save it somewhere or present it. Okay? That is your job as a programmer. Now, when you create a function, you can accept data. Because if your function doesn't accept anything and later on you come and you say Tony, it's a useless function. Like Tony is a nice name, but the function is useless. The function is useless because if you say Tony and you call Tony multiple times, just like we did here, it's just going to keep telling you undefined, undefined, undefined. So we say let Tony is equals to this. How many times we call Tony is going to give us the same thing. Undefined, 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 undefined. Okay? So your function can accept parameters and it can return something. I am Tony. So if the function that we put here, let Tony is equals to I am Tony, and we say Tony, it's going to return I am Tony. What did we just do? Ooh, I threw a curveball. Okay, so what we did here, we said Tony is equals to, and then I did not put the curly braces, and so I can say I am Tony. Okay? So it's throwing an error because we're trying to redeclare. We already declared Tony up here. So what we can do here is say Tony is equals to, and then here we can say I am Sarah. Okay? It won't complain. Now when we call Tony, okay, it's not going to return anything because even though we said I am Sarah here, the difference is that because of this blocks here, this data is scoped inside here, okay? So it doesn't return anything. So what we can do is come inside here if we want to return I am Sarah and say return I am Sarah. Now when we call Tony, it will say I am Sarah. Let's clear, let's repeat, okay? If you want your function to return something, you say let func is equals to, okay, and then inside your function you say return whatever you want. Now when you call func, it will return whatever you wanted it to return. If you returned true, it's a boolean. If you return 50, it's a number. If you return an object, it's an object. If you return an array, it's an array, okay? So in your function body, you can type return whatever you want. However, if you say func, okay, or let fun or let fn is equals to, and you don't put this curly braces, you instead just put whatever you want, what you're actually doing here is saying return whatever you want. Okay? That's what you're actually doing there. Okay? So this is a comment, so it gets ignored. Okay? This is our function. Okay? So if we call fn here, you still get whatever you want because the minute there are no curly braces around this function, this will get returned automatically. Okay? I hope it's clear. If you don't put curly braces around, especially when you're using this syntax, whatever you put here will be returned automatically. And you will see we'll use it a lot when we start writing a lot of JavaScript code. Okay? Now, that is one way to define functions. Okay? You can return something from your function. You can also accept. Okay? Your function can also accept something. So let's imagine that we want to grade someone. Okay? So here we're going to say func or fn is equals to name, and then we want to say hello Okay? So, if we say Tony, it says, hello Tony, how are you? If we say Miriam, it says, hello Miriam, how are you? Okay? So now imagine we call this let greet is equals to the person to greet, and then we say hello person, how are you doing? Now whenever we say greet Tony, it's going to say hello Tony, how are you doing? Okay? So here we gave a variable to our function. And why did I throw this? I want to show you something about the way JavaScript works. If you have let greet is equals to person like this, what you actually, if you have this here, it's the same thing as not having this person. It's like same person, age, okay? So you have person, you have age like this when you have multiple variables, but if you put it without, okay, it's the same. Okay, so let greet equals to when you have no variable, but if there is just name inside here, you can get rid of the parentheses and just leave it like that. And then if you want to return inside, you can get rid of the curly braces and then put whatever you want to put there. Now this will fail because we already defined greet, but let's go ahead. Redeclaration of let greet. Okay, so let's clear and then let's go over this one more time. You want to create a function, there are two ways. The first way, you say function. Function is saying I want to create a function, and the name of that function, we can call it aloha, okay? And then you open parentheses. Now this is where the function body starts. You close parentheses, you open curly brace, and inside these curly braces will be the body of your function. At the same time, you can come here and specify the things that you want your function to accept, okay? And then inside your function body, you can return, hello, my name is, plus name, and then you say, and I am, plus age, yes old. Okay? Now, so okay, so inside here we have an error. Hello, my name is plus name, and I am plus age, years old. So unexpected token string literal. I think there's a typo somewhere there. Let's add George, and let's put this in Visual Studio Code so that I can see where the error is. And yes, we did not add the plus. We did not add a plus after the age here. We didn't add a plus sign. That's typo. Okay? Another advantage of using a code editor, you can see where you forgot something. Okay, so if we copy this and then we put it back in the browser, okay? Now if we say aloha and we say Tony and we say 44, hello, my name is Tony and I'm 44 years old, okay? So you can use the aloha as a gradient and you can call it multiple times. So that's the first way. You say function, the name of the function, and then the body of the function. and that's it. Now if we say aloha, it returns undefined. So we declared this function we had up here, down here, okay? Now, another way is to say let aloha equals to, and then because we already used aloha up here, we cannot use let down here, okay? But we can use something else and say let fn is equals to, and that's just fine, okay? So you can either use function or you can use let and then the name of your function, and then you give it the anonymous function where you put the parameters if you have any, okay, and then the body of the function. These are the two ways that you can declare a function in JavaScript. These are the two ways that you can declare a function in JavaScript. I hope it makes sense. Are we following? Did we understand? Are there any questions? No news is good news. Okay. So your mission, should you choose to accept it, go ahead, create a while loop If you have a question, please ask. Create a while loop counting from 0 to 100 and exit when the loop is at 100. I can give you the first. You can say let loop equals to 0, and then you say while loop, and then you put your code after this point, and then you put, so you say while loop, you put your condition here, and then inside the body of the loop, you do what you need to do. Anyone has created the loop, please go ahead and share. This is an opportunity for me to correct whatever misconceptions or areas that are gray areas. Okay? Let's create the, oh, thank you, Ramon. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Beautiful. Amazing. Ramon just answered the question perfectly. Thank you, Ramon. That is a wonderful answer to the question. Let I is equals to 0, while I is less than or equals to 100. You want to log I, and then you go ahead and then you increment I++. I couldn't have done it better myself. Okay? Succinct, straight to the point. Super happy to see. Now, we're going to go into objects, arrays, and JSON. Before we do that though, let us build something, or let us add some logic to this. Now, we're going to make this page here. We're going to make it a little bit more, we're going to make it a little bit more interactive, okay? So what we're going to do, we're going to create a way for you to search via the company name, to search via the company email, or to search via the company description. But before we do that, we need to change the current way that this is done. So right now, can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me? Hello? Okay. Sorry, went on mute. Okay, so we're going to change this. We're going to build this page and add all the JavaScript we've learned so far. Okay? We're going to add all the JavaScript we've learned so far, and then we're going to make the page a little bit more interactive. Right now, this page is using hard-coded values. Let's explain what that means. So if you come here to enablers, you have in your table the body, this table row, and it repeats multiple times. We just looked at the for, so we're going to use the for loop in here, and we're going to use a tag called a template tag, and then we're going to say x4. Now remember, x dash whatever we do after that is basically we're saying Alpine. So this part basically is like we're saying that we want to execute, okay? We want to execute the command that comes next. So X here is short form for execute, okay? So if you see X dash, we're saying this is an executable. Wherever you see X dash whatever, okay? That is Alpine, okay? X dash whatever is Alpine. We're going to execute it because of the library that we included, okay? X dash whatever is Alpine. If you want to have this, if you want to build something just like this, you include Alpine.js up here, okay? Just Google Alpine, you copy the script, you paste it in your HTML, okay? And then you can use X dash whatever. So this is executing. So think of this like the for loop that we did in JavaScript, but now in HTML, okay? So X dash 4. Now, what we're going to say here is X4 item, okay, or X4 enabler in, and then we're going to put an array, okay? So we're going to loop, and we're going to say, if we put here 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10. If we come back here now, you see we have 10 items and we didn't have to type it 10 different times, okay? Just because we say X4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, we get 10 different items showing up here. So I think I'm going to have to mute someone. Okay. So now, just because we put X4, we are able to go through all the, we're able to repeat this 10 times, okay? But it's not interesting or exciting because we're repeating the same thing over and over and over again. Now, ideally, on a production system or in a live system, we're going to fetch this data. We'll say X for enabler in enablers, okay? And enablers is going to be something that we fetch from the website or from from the API, okay? And then that way we can have okay, so let's go again. Okay, we're back. So, like we were saying, ideally we're going to get this data from an API. Okay, so we can come here and we can say enablers, and we're going to make an empty array. Okay, and then we want to say something like fetch enablers, and then in this method we are going to go to the website and then fetch enablers and then get a response. But of course, because we have no API, we're just going to say this dot enablers is equals, and then we say here the description is documenting the Nigerian story, and we have name, we have the email, we have the description, and we have, okay, so we have that on here, and we can say name, workstation engine, and then we say email, workstation.ng at example.com, description, kicking apps and taking names, and then we have the name, and here we have the big hands, and then here we have the email, and we have the description. Okay, so now we have enablers, but if you notice, even though we have enablers, this is showing nothing. So another thing we can do here is we can say template xif. Remember we had the if, okay? So xif is the way we say if something, and then here we say no enablers found. So what you see here is no enablers found, okay? And then here we want to say fetch enablers, and then we want to put okay, and if we click on fetch data, you see that we automatically get the data, and then we get some enablers here, okay? But it is still showing Trust TV. Why is that? Well, for one, we need to change what we are showing inside here to reflect. So we're going to say the key is equals to enabler.email, okay? Here we'll say the x text, okay, is equals to enabler.email, and then we can delete this trust example, and then we're going to say x text is equals to enabler.name, and then we're going to delete this trust TV, and then we're going to say x text is equals to enabler.description, and we're going to delete documenting the Nigerian story. And now when we fetch data, you get the correct names and the correct description. Now, what exactly happened here? We looked at the for loop in JavaScript, and then what we did here is, remember we say when you have x4, what we're basically doing is we're taking the x dash away, that's we're executing JavaScript, and then when you have if enablers.length is equals to 0, when we have no enablers, then we show no enablers found, okay? Now, another thing that we can do, we can create a table row here, and in this table row, in the first one, we're going to put an input, and then we're going to say placeholder search company name. Then we're going to repeat this, and then we say search company email, and then down here we're going to say search company description. Now, what you notice is you now have the ability to type here, for instance, and then if we type, we should be able to search via name, search via description, or search via, so we have that. But what if we want to make this flat, okay? We want to make this input, and we want to make it flat. And when we say we want to make an input flat, we don't want it to have borders. We don't want it to have anything. We just want it to be. So what are we going to do? Now remember, we have styles, and then we have the input, which is where we created here. So we can come here, and we say input.input.flat, and we say border none, okay? And then we say the outline none. And if we are to come back here and oh, we put it in type instead of putting it in class. So there's something we can do. and let's do this. Okay. So one of the things you notice is that we're editing 3 different things at once. And this is one of the benefits of having a good code editor, is that you can save your time. Instead of editing 3 different things, you can just use some handy shortcuts to be more productive. So now we are going to take a look here, and you see there's no border, but then we have this slight box shadow. So we're going to remove that, and we're going to say box shadow none, and then there's nothing now. So you have the ability to search, and then you can search via the description, you can search via, and we can just make this even shorter and call this and then call this email search, and call this name search. Okay, so we have all these, but how exactly do we search inside the data here for the necessary name? Okay, so we can say we want to filter our enablers. Okay, so we can say filter enablers. Okay, now one of the things that we can do is we have the email address. Yes, I have a hand. How are the styles referenced in the HTML file? Okay, so if you take a look here, you see we have a link, and that link pulls in the styles.css file. That's how it's referenced. In the top of the page, you have a link, and that link pulls in the public styles.css. That is how it is referenced. I hope that answers your question. Okay. Now, we have filter enablers. Now, there are a couple of ways that we can use to filter the enablers. One of the ways we can use is we can switch on what, so we say filter name, filter email, or filter email, and then we say filter description. Okay, and then what we want to then do here is we say, based on the data that we have there, if we put in here some value, let's see, inspect console. Oh yes, we need to tie the input elements to this. So we come here and we say X model, and we say this is filter name, which is what we put here, I believe, yes. And we say fetch data, and we say, okay. And we say, oh, station. What are we doing here? Let's inspect this console. Okay. Now we need to, yes, so it's not enough that we do that. We probably want to make it X effect. So where is this? So we want to put this here. And one of the things that we can do is put an X effect, and then we say filter enablers, okay? And then we can fetch data, and then when we say trusts, and you see that it's automatically filters out only the name with trust in it, and that works. But now we need to reset when we search, so that when we come back to when there's no data here, then we reset this basically, okay? So we need to say that getters and setters, but we haven't talked about getters and setters, so that might be more complex. So we're going to say backup enablers, and then what we're going to do inside here then, we're going to back up the enablers, okay? And so something that we also want to do is we can say more so like if, so we can check here to see if empty filters, and we can say filters. So I'm going to explain what we're doing in a bit and use it as a teaching, okay? And then inside here, we're going to say we want to return if this filter name is empty, this filter description is empty. Remember we talked about and, okay? So I'm going to explain what this does in a minute, and then we're going to say if this dot is empty filters, okay, we want to set this dot enablers is equals to is the backup enablers, okay? And what we can actually even do is filters, okay? What we're going to do then is we're just going to return and not even bother entering inside here, okay? And then we're going to say this does enablers is equals to this, and we're going to say this dot backup enablers is equals to this enablers. Okay, so let's take a look real quickly at what is going on here. Now, remember we talked about how the X data is the way that we store variables, particularly when we're using Alpha and JS, okay? And then we created an email address, and we said this is how we, like this object here, whatever you put in this object is available. It cascades into all the elements in this, all the children of this element. Okay, so anything you put here, if we come here and we put food, and we say food, and we say it's rice. Yes, you know I was going to use rice. You know definitely I was going to use rice. So food is rice. Then anywhere inside here that we put X text as, so we can come down here and we can say something, fetch data, and we can come down here and we can say button, and we can say X text, and if we say food, then what will appear inside here is rice. That is because any key you put inside this X data can be accessed inside any child by just using X text food, okay? And any key you put inside X data can be set, okay, by using X model food. So if we have an input element like this, if I type inside this input element, okay, then the input element is going to update the food or whatever we put as the X model. Is it clear? If it's not understood, you can tell me and I can explain again. Okay, no news is good news, so I'm guessing that it is clear. Okay, so let's take it nice and slow. What we have here is a JavaScript object. I hope that much is understood. Okay, what we have here is just a JavaScript object. So we can copy this and we can come inside here and we can paste it. And the minute we paste it, you see that it's just a JavaScript object. Okay, that's all it is. So when we say let or const, okay, you see we have the key, we have the value, key, value, key, value, key, value, key, value, key, value, key, value, function. Okay? It's just a JavaScript object. It's a simple JavaScript object. Now, what is going on? Remember we talked about how the classes are a wrapper on top of an object, okay, with some syntactic sugar over it. So when we're using the Alpine library, okay, when we're using the Alpine library, we're using JavaScript. We're using JavaScript, but we're using a JavaScript object, okay? We're using a JavaScript object. Now, I want to use this to explain how JavaScript objects work. Now, a JavaScript object, from what you can see here, and this is a beautiful object because it has all different kinds of data, okay? It has strings, it has arrays. It's a wonderful example to be used. We can even add a number to this object. It doesn't really, like, you just have a key and you have a value. So we have the const object up here. Now, something we can do down here is create another JavaScript object, okay? So we have another JavaScript object down here. Let's call this let nobj, new object, for instance. But let's give it a new nice name. New object equals to, and then we create object that create, which is an object that I want one of, that's an assignment. So let me put this as an assignment in the chat, and then so what does object.create do? What does object.create do, and what does object.assign do? Okay, so I'm going to leave that as an assignment and then we continue in a bit. Object.create, what does it do? What does object.assign do? Okay. Who's posting an answer using my account? Okay, so we have the admin controller can you kindly just make sure that the abusers are kicked out of the room and not participate? Thank you. And Sute Paul, we have object.assign. So the object.assign copies the values of all enumerable properties from one or more source objects to a target object. Beautifully said. We're going to take a look at that in a bit. What does object.assign do? Okay. Now, the name is actually quite simple. You're assigning stuff to another object. You want to, this is your target object, and this is the destination, and you want to assign items. That's basically, so you're assigning, okay? That's object.assign. And object.create is basically prototyping. Like you want to prototype a new object, okay? So that's what it does. And that's why you say with a specified prototype object. Okay, it prototypes. JavaScript has prototypical inheritance. Now, that prototypical inheritance we're going to discuss much later in a bit when we talk about the prototype chain. Okay, so now let's create a new object. Okay, one of the easiest ways to create an object. Here is the spread operator. We're not going to use that. Okay, spread syntax. We're just going to create a new object from scratch. Now, when you want to create an object, you have an closing curly brace, and then inside here we can say age 10. So age 10, you have the key and you have the value. You have the key and you have the value. And then you can of course create some methods inside, and you can say do something, and then you can say I am doing something. So this is a JavaScript object. You have the opening brace, and then you have a couple of methods on it as well. Okay, this is JavaScript object. Key, value, function. Okay, so key value, and then you have methods in this object. Okay. So let's take a look at our, so we say here, let obj is equal to 10, okay? And then we have num, and then here we say we want to read like console.log, okay? This.a. Okay, now if we say obj.num, okay, you see that it logs 10 because inside of the num method we say this.a. So when you say this.a, it is assessing this object and the attribute a. Okay, that is a JavaScript object. You have the opening curly brace, you have keys, and then you can attach methods, and you can use the this inside of it. Okay? You can use the this inside of it. Now, one of the things that we can do with an object is like things that JavaScript allows you to do, allows you to play with a prototype chain and a couple of other things. But for the context of trying to explain what we have done here, okay, is when we type trust, you see it filters out, and then if we type here work, it's not going to filter out because we haven't connected the work input to our, that when you use an X model, you're going to connect this input that you have here to the object when you use an X model. And then if we use an X model for description, we're going to connect this description input to the model. But let's take a look at our model to see what you're talking about. I hope what I'm saying is clear up to this point. If you don't understand, please let me know, and I'm going to explain again. If you take a look at this object down here, you see we have food, right? Let's take that out. We have the email address, okay? We have enablers, which is the collection of all these enablers here, okay? Like all these enablers, Trust TV, Workstation, Big Hand, like you see them inside here. These are the enablers, okay? And then we have the to be restored. We have the filter name, which is what we use here, okay? We use filter name here. We have the filter email, which is what we want to use here to filter enablers via email. And we have the filter description, which is what we want to use here to filter enablers via description. Now, we haven't connected the filter email and the filter description, but we have connected the filter name. And let's see what we're talking about. So if you take a look at the enablers file and you look in the, not in the form, let's minimize the, okay, let's minimize the table head, and let's take a look at the first row where we have the search input, okay? Now, here, if you notice, we have the input, and then we have here something called X model, okay? X model. Now, for this X model, we say we gave it equals to filter name. So whenever you see the X model, okay, remember X is execute, okay? When you see the X model, what we're saying here is this filter name, we want you to connect it as a model, okay? Connect the filter name, whatever value is typed into this input. Any value that is typed into this input, we want you to connect it to the data, to the object up here, into this filter name, okay? Filter name here, because we use filter name, and we used it inside here as an X model, when you type something into the name search, it will be assigned into the object on the filter name. Now, if I type trust here, you see that it finds trust. If I type it finds the big hands. If I type hands, it finds that. If I type big, it finds it. If I type the G, it finds, because there's G in Workstation NG and there's G in the big hands, but there's no G in trust. So you can see that it searches appropriately and it finds, okay? Because this name search is connected to this object up here, okay? Filter name. Now, filter email is this second one here, but you see we didn't put any X model on filter email. We didn't put any X model on filter email. Search, what you type, filter name, like it will be assigned here, okay? And then let's show an example, okay? Where we have this rice, let's replace it and put name, okay? Now, if we type something here, You see, as we type, it is automatically shown next to the button. Okay? As we delete, it is also deleting next to the button as well. So as you're typing into that element, the filter name variable is being updated because you say, I want to model, take this data and model it to that filter name. Okay? Now, this, let's minimize this template, let's minimize this one. If we remove this X model from filter name, like we remove X model from this input, and we come back here, if we type into this place, it no longer updates the variable. It no longer updates that object. Like there is no update that is sent into the object because we say we remove the X model. We're saying, hey, we don't want to model this input after anything. The minute you put whatever value is typed into this input, send it as a model into the object. Remember, this is just a JavaScript object, and then filter name is just a key in that object. If we used filter email, okay, whatever you type will be enter filter email. If we use filter description, whatever you type will enter filter description. Is what I'm saying making sense to anyone? So, this is an object, and beautiful. Thanks, Katrine. So this is an object, and whatever you, like this, when we say here this.enablers, I showed already in the console how this.enablers goes to the enablers key for this specific object. So when we type fetch enablers, or we use this.empty filters, and we say this.enablers equals to this.enablers filter, and we pass in enablers. We're going to take a look at this filter option in a bit, which when we go into arrays. Okay, so here we have is empty filters, this.filter name, this.filter email, this.filter description. We reset them back to 0. Okay, like we say, sorry, we say if this is equals to empty, and this is equals to empty, and this is equals to empty, return true. So if we connect the filter name to the filter, to this filter here, name search, and we connect filter email to the email search, and we connect filter description to the description search, whenever you type something in description, filter description will be updated. Whenever you type something in email search, filter email will be updated. Whenever you type something in name search, filter name will be updated. Okay? So what is now actually happening is that when you also delete, like those variables or those keys will also be emptied as you press the key. Okay? Now this is something that is called two-way data binding. Okay? As you change the data in an input element, it is also being changed in a model behind the scenes. Now, Vue.js, React, and all these other frameworks, it's like a reactivity engine behind the scenes that does this. So it's two-way data binding. So let us connect all the models to all the input elements, and let's see what happens when we search. So we come back here to enablers. We put the X model. We put this as filter email, and we put this as filter description. And then now when we say work, the same thing happens. We say example, because every email has example.com, the data doesn't update in our local search, And then if we say something like OM, they all have OM. If we say U, only Trust TV has a U. If we say something like G, only NG and the big hands have a G, so that is found. And then here, if we come and we say something like AN, they all have an AN because we have AND. And then if we say something like an AP, kicking apps, and if we say an IN, only documenting and kicking apps and taking names have an IN. You can see it in documenting the Nigerian story and kicking apps and taking names. So you can search based on the content of the description, based on the content of the email, and based on the content of the company name. You see something like this, becomes. Now, ideally, you want to actually search on the server as well, and that is something that we're going to take a look at when we get into the Python tutorial. Okay, so we have made this user interface quite useful, and we have now what we're going to do is we're going to have a quick exercise where everyone please create an element and attach an X model to that element to see if we understand what the X model does, and put the element in a div. Okay, if you have questions, please ask me and I will jump out to help. We have approximately 3-4 minutes to do this. Your time starts now. Is the question understood? Okay, so in the absence of any questions, we're going to go ahead and implement this. So we're going to go here, new file, exercise. Let's rename this solution, and then we're going to say doc. And then here we're going to put a simple x data. Now we say okay, and so we need to just put the link to Alpine script, and you're good to go. Okay, and that is all for creating the X data. If you have any questions, please ask. 2 minutes for a question and we continue. Going once. Few seconds ago. In the absence of question, I'm going to assume that we are all good. Okay, so we know how to create objects. The question is, do we know how to access the members of objects? So, we have an object that has been created. Let's say let object equals to A5. We want to get the value of A. We can say object A to get it. So you see there are two ways to get the object. You can say object dot, which is dot notation, and you can use attribute access notation, which is object, and you push the square bracket and the name. Now, this is important because it's the same thing for an array. So let's imagine you have an array, and the array is A, B, 3, D, 5, F. True. Okay? Now, we said if we have object as A, B, C, and then we want to get this AA item, we can say object.A or object.B to get B or object.C to get C. Another way is to say object square brackets and we put in the key, which is B or here C. Okay? Now what you'll notice is that we call this the index into the object. So you see that the object is indexed by key and the array is indexed by position. So to get the item at A, array index is start at 0. We're going to say array 0 will give us A. To get the item at 1, the item at B, okay, which is the second item, we're going to say array 1. And to get the item at 3, we'll say array, and so on and so forth. Okay? We have array and indexed by position. But for the object, it's indexed by key. So these are the two ways to assess an object. You use either the key index or you use the dot notation where you say object dot whatever key is in the object. Okay? So that is the quickest way to access object data. Now, the next thing that we're going to be taking a look at is going to be JavaScript object notation. Now, we're getting into electronic data interchange territory. And in this territory is where we're going to be taking a look at. In this territory is where we're going to be taking a look at how information is exchanged between an API and the browser. Okay, so let's take a look at our trusted Google. Remember we said that the JavaScript object, we gave an example of it. It's key value, key value, key value. Now, JSON is almost the same as the JavaScript object. The difference is that where the JavaScript object has the keys like this, JSON has the keys in a different format. So for instance, we can come here and we can say data.json, and where we have this index.js and we have to say const obj is equals to it, in JSON you cannot say that obj is equals to and then your data. So we have to change all of this to double quotes, and then one of the things that can be done would be Can you hear me? Okay. I think the audio is back again. Okay. So here you see we have sample JSON data. Okay. We have sample JSON data, and this JSON data captures the plethora of what is acceptable. So it's called JavaScript object notation because it mirrors closely what you have in JavaScript, but it is more suited for capturing data and sending data from server to browser, from browser to server. Now, usually the web is markup oriented in that HTML is a markup language, but JavaScript is the language of behavior, and so when you want to send data, it makes sense that the language that is going to process that data to send data mimics the language as close as possible, or is as close to language as reasonably can get. So that is why JavaScript object notation is quite popular, because it's as close to JavaScript as possible. And there are some utility methods that you can use to parse from JSON to JavaScript and from JavaScript to JSON. So we can take a look at some of those methods. So let's say we have a JSON object. We say JSON. We want to change an object to JSON. We say here age is 10. We say yes, married is true. We say children, and we say name, and we say okay. So when this is done, you can see that what we get back here is very close, and we have every key enclosed in double quotes, and the strings are also double quotes. Okay, so that is, so JavaScript has some utility methods to convert from a JavaScript object to JSON. It's a string format. You see here it's encapsulated in single quotes. And so if you have this JSON object, for instance, and you want to JSON.class, and then it gives you back a JavaScript object. So you have JSON.stringify to take a JavaScript object, and you have a JSON.parse to take a JSON string and change it back into a JavaScript object. Okay? So a bit of history. Now, when we talk about JSON and we say EDI, big water lift, EDI stands for electronic data interchange. Remember we said the job of a software engineer is what exactly? You can remember? The job of a software engineer is taking data and moving it from one place to another. In the process, you might transform it. If you are a developer, okay, game developer, thing we should be doing. Now, when we started, because we haven't had as much depth with JavaScript, dropping this might have been more complicated, but as we use JavaScript more and more, this is how we want to inject data into a string. We want to use a backtick, okay? And then we want to use this $, and then in between the curly braces after the $, whatever value is inside here will be injected as the value here, and whatever value is inside age will be injected as the value here. So when we log this, what you get is, my name is John and I am 25 years old. Okay? So this is string interpolation. Okay? It is string interpolation, and that is how you want to work with strings and edit strings. Okay, so moving on away from string interpolation, there are a couple of other things that we can do with strings as well. So there are a couple of things that we can do with string interpolation as well. A couple of things we can do with strings. One of the things that we can do with strings is so let's say we had a string called let profession equals to software engineer, okay? And we can say profession, okay? And there, if you take a look here, you can see there's a lot to say ends with. To find if a string ends with something, we can check the index of to check if the string has a specific character. We can say length, which is what we were talking about earlier. We can say match, normalize, repeat, replace all, slice, split, starts with, substring to local string, trim end, trim left, trim start. So all this, and I encourage you to not just play with strings in this manner, but also do the same thing with integers, do the same thing with dates, do the same thing with objects, do the same thing with booleans, and there's a lot that you would notice as a result of this. Another thing that we didn't touch on was how do you get a string and convert it into a number? So there are some utility helper methods that exist on the number object. So you have the number object, you have the string as well, and you have if you notice that many of the things that you saw on your string, such as the length and whatnot, they are also on the string. So that should give you an idea, like where the string gets its prototypical information from. Okay, so I encourage you to take a look at the integers. So if you say let age is equals to 500, and you say, okay, sorry, we already have age, so we say age dot to exponential, for instance, or to fixed, or to precision. Many of these things here you can see to string converts the integer value into a string. So I encourage you to play around with the different variables that you create, and then take a look at the methods that exist, and then also read up on those methods, because it is going to be a lot more than 30, 40 hours if we wanted to go through all the single methods that exist in something. Okay, so for instance, if we create an array and we say let our array is equals to A3, true, null, new date, undefined, an object, and let's say a number that is a float as well, just for good measure. Okay, array has a couple of helper functions on it, and this actually do a lot. So we used array.filter, and then in one of our examples earlier, there is array.every, okay, and there are a couple of other nice functions, like you have array.push, you have array.onShift, yeah, this is it here, and you can, so for instance, we have our array right here, okay, and then we say array.push, and we say, okay, now if we take a look at the array, it's no longer 8 items, but 9 items, because we pushed an item into the array. What if we want to put an item, not at the end of the array, we say array dot on shift, for instance. We get an item from, so we say array, for instance, dot, and when we take our array, we put an item in the beginning of the array, okay? So when you push an item, you push it to the end, and when you unshift, you put it at the beginning of the array, okay? And we can also do a couple of things like slicing of the array and so much more. And there's also splicing of the array. So to cover all these functionalities in an array, in an object, in an integer, in a string, on a date, it's going to be a lot. And frankly speaking, you might be overwhelmed with all the different functions that exist. Now, as with any programming activity, the key to mastery is curiosity. So we have taken a look at JavaScript to demystify it. It's not a difficult language. It has a lot of bad rep because of its peculiarities. It's a peculiar language, but it is not a difficult language. Now, I have spent a lot of time writing code in Java, in Rust, in Golang, and C#. And there are languages that are far more complicated than JavaScript. There are languages that there's a lot of joke in the language community around shooting yourself in the foot and shooting yourself recursively in the foot. And when we get into Python and we're taking a look at recursion, we're going to explain those concepts in detail. But JavaScript is not a difficult language. So the best way to master is to play around with it, okay? Play around with JavaScript, play around with JavaScript, play around with JavaScript. So it is not a difficult language to master. It's actually quite easy to master if you are curious and you play around with it well enough. Okay, so moving on from this, we're going to take a look at one more topic, and then we're going to go on a break. Okay, we'll take a look at one more topic, and then we'll go on a break. And when we come back from that break, we're going to go into asynchronous programming with JavaScript. We're going to take a look at async. We're going to take a look at await. We're going to explain what asynchronous programming is. We're going to explain what we mean when we say something is single-threaded, for instance, or multi-threaded, and why JavaScript is fast in the context of the V8 engine or when it's executing, even though it is not a compiled language. We're going to take a look at the internals of JavaScript so you get an overview of what is actually happening. Earlier we talked about the stack and we talked about the heap, and we talked about how, think of it like a stack of plates. When you want to take something, you take it off the top. Okay? We're going to take a look at things such as last in, first out, FIFO, LIFO, what they mean. And again, this is just contextual knowledge, information that you know, so that when someone is talking about last in, first out, or talking about the stack and talking about the heap, you are familiar. Like, it's not something that is going to stump you or something that's going to confuse you or put you in a spiral. You know exactly what you're talking about because you're going to experience this in almost every programming language that you use. The deeper you go, then you're going to get into bed with such terms. Okay, so what is the thing that we're going to take a look at before we go on a break? Earlier we had started talking about the events that the browser fires when things happen, but we didn't take a look at adding your own events and how do you add an event listener if you want something, like you want to add an event listener to, let's say, an element. Remember, we said everything that is on your web page is available via the document object. And then we talked about how the document object is like an API, it's like a remote control, okay? We talked about how it's like a TV, and I'm just recapping. So I'm recapping that, and we're going to cover this, and then we're going to go on a break. Okay? So the document is your remote control onto the web page in JavaScript. So if you open any, not just the one we have here, open any website, okay? Google.com, irrespective of where you go, you right click, you say inspect, you come here to your console. Ooh, there's a lot of errors and a lot of yellow. Bad Google. Okay, so you go ahead and then you clear this. If you type here document.children, okay, you're going to get back a HTML collection. Okay, if you type document.children, you're going to get back a HTML collection. If you went to a site like workstation.ng and you type the same thing, document.children, you're going to get back a HTML collection. So you say document.children, and let's see, document.children. Length, or document.children.item. And then we say document.children, okay, dot named item, for instance. Now, all these are elements on the document.children, okay? So when you say document.children, you get the HTML collection. And then if you get document.children, okay, and then we get the first item, you're going to get the root HTML collection. Because remember, the document is an API to your web page. So when you say document.children, it gives you an array-like response. And then remember, we said if you want to get the items in an array, you're going to use the index of that item. So we say document.children, okay, and we say .length, we say it's 1, and an array is 0 indexed. Remember, an array is 0 indexed. So if we say let array is equals to A through, and then we say new date. If we wanted to get the second item, which is the true, we would use array 1, because array 0 will give us A, array 1 will give us 2, and array 2 will give us the last item, and array 3 will show an undefined, okay? In other programming languages, an array 3 will give you an exception, okay? So for instance, if we opened here, let's say, the terminal, okay, and then we type here Python, we make this slightly bigger, okay, and we're going to get to this in a minute, and we say array is equals to A, and we do the same thing, true, okay, and then we say, not, let's even say 4.5, okay, and we say array 3, you're going to get an error, index, list index out of range, okay, so in some languages, if you did that, you would get out of range, but in JavaScript, you would get an undefined. Okay, so remember, when you say document.children, what you're going to get an array like, okay? So you can say .length, and you can go into it with the 0 index and get the first item, okay? Now the first item you're going to get is an element, and because it is an element, you can say .children again, okay? And then it's going to show you that this has a length of 3. The first item here, you can see at 0 is the head, okay? The item at 1 is the bodied, and the item at 2 is a Grammarly integration that is making, like it's an element that is injected because there's an extension in the browser. And we're going to look at extensions much later, okay? So if we wanted to get the child of the root document, okay, we'll say document.children 0, and then we would save this into a variable. Now, how do we create variables again? We can say const, we can say let const root element is equals to this, and then we say root element dot children, and we say we want to get the element at 1, which is the body, and we want to say we want to get the children. And then here we're going to get a lot more because we have a nav, we have a section, we have a container, and we can take a look here. We can expand this and you're going to see all of them, okay? We have the nav, which is the first element, and you see it here, okay? The nav, you see it? We have a section, which is the second element. We have the container, which is the third element, or at index 2. We have another section, and as we go, you can see all of them, okay? See it? Here, okay? And then we have the fourth or the fifth element here, which is index 4. And then as we go down, we have section, and then and so on and so forth. So you can see all the elements that exist on this page. And we can get all these elements from inside JavaScript. We can remove the elements from the DOM. We can mutate the DOM. We can add elements to the DOM. We can update the values in forms. We can control our entire page with JavaScript, okay? So you need to understand the document object model API to work with the DOM. Now, you can either do that or you can use something like a React or something like Vue.js that provides an API or an abstraction over the DOM and is like a very efficient way, has a very efficient algorithm. Remember algorithm, we said it was a sequence of steps of updating the DOM. Okay, so any questions? Remember, we're going to go for a break in a few seconds. Does anyone have any question? When we come back, we're going to take a look at asynchronous programming in JavaScript, the spread operator, and then we'll jump into Python, which should be exciting. Okay, in the absence of questions, we will see each other again in a few minutes. Thank you for joining. Please stay on the call or grab a snack, and I will catch you all in a few minutes.
You have about an hour to take us.
I want to take it later. I don't take it now. I want to take it later.